Let's move on to our fifth panel today. Corporate cyber risk management. What makes the difference? Moderator is Kai Hermsen. He's global coordinator of the Charter of Trust Siemens, representing the company's cybersecurity to external organizations like the World Economic Forum and particularly the Charter of Trust. He's also responsible for implementing the Charter of Trust principles within Siemens, and he's a member of the Siemens Cybersecurity Board. Kai Hermsen, we are very curious to gain insight into the corporate perspective. Go ahead with the fifth panel, please.
Well, thank you very much. Now, we heard throughout the day that data breaches, ransomware attacks, privacy failures, and other cybersecurity issues are now on everybody's radar. But still, we see that companies seem to struggle with preparing for them. They lack insight in the cyber risk. They might not have the right strategies in place. They don't practice their recovery plans, if they have recovery plans at all. So one could say that most organizations' approach to risk management is actually pretty risky. Now, the challenges that hold companies back are manifold, and I'm very happy that in today's panel we can discuss this matter. The panel is labeled Corporate Cyber Risk Management, What Makes the Difference? So without further ado, I want to introduce the panel, and I would go from east to west, if that's okay. And we start all the way in Japan, where Mihoko Matsubara is in Tokyo, very late at night, so thank you for staying up so long for us. She's the Chief Cyber Security Strategist at NTT Corporation, NTT Global. She previously worked for the Japanese Ministry of Defense and has a master of the Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies in Washington, D.C. She's very active on social media. She's a writer, she's a speaker, and well, I think we can say so she's also an influencer. So I follow you on Twitter, and if you also want to do so, please feel free to do so. Then let's move a little bit westwards to Germany, also to Munich, where I'm sitting. We have Ramon Mörl, who founded the company IT Watch in 2002, and ever since is, of course, the founder and also the chief executive officer. He graduated in computer science from Munich Technical University, and he's very active in all kinds of forums and associations. And well, Ramon, I think you're all over the place, so this is always interesting. So nice to have you. Now, and let's go still a little bit westwards, and I think we go to Great Britain, though Martin Clemens is working for Credit Suisse, located in Zurich. But he's based out of Great Britain, if I'm not mistaken. He's the security advisor for Credit Suisse, and in this function, he advises both the CEO, but also the advisory board on matters of cybersecurity and innovation by and large. He has a long history in cybersecurity, 33 years in national security in Great Britain, brings tremendous experience on this matter, and well, I mean, I think he can tell from his experience, but of course also from the current work that he's doing on risk management. And then let's jump the pond and move all the way to the US, where Melody Balsett is located. Melody told me that it's pretty windy over there today, so hopefully the line is stable. Melody is the US head of cyber technology, data and resilience risk for Barclays. I hope I got that one wrong. That one right, Melody. And she had been working for other companies like AES and IBM. She holds a master with merit from the University of Manchester, and she's very active also, or she has been very active in forums like ISACA, for example, in the past. So welcome to all the panelists. I'm very happy to have all of you, and let's dive right into this, if I may. First question, let's stay with Melody in the US. So tell us a little bit about the importance of risk management to cybersecurity, Melody.
Sure. Thanks, Kai. I'd be glad to take that question. And it's such a simple question, right, on the surface, but it's also one that has incredible depth at the same time. There's so many different ways you can describe and explain that. But if I were to respond plainly, right, without risk management, cybersecurity is just noise, right? It's a map without a compass, if you will. To truly understand your cybersecurity posture and run an effective cybersecurity program, you really need to have defined and measurable risk management. And so what I'd like to do is just kind of break down 3 different areas that I think need particular focus within cybersecurity. And so the first is with identifying risks. It's at the simplest, most foundational point of risk management, but understanding the breadth of your risk cannot be done in a silo. Right, because risk identification can come from many different sources, right, beyond just your tools. It could be from end users even. And if you actually apply the 3 lines of defense model, it could come from any organization within any 3 of those layers. And so it's otherwise relatively easy to identify your vulnerabilities, your compliance gaps, configuration compliance gaps, and the attacks against your infrastructure. So don't work in a silo. And second is really prioritization. And where I see a lot of cybersecurity organizations fail is effective prioritization and the ability to assess business impact against likelihood. And so that's also, I'd say, at the foundation of effective risk management to cybersecurity. If you can, I mean, in other words, if you can't prioritize and create that view, you're not going to be able to apply the right risk treatment, whether that's risk acceptance, whether it's transfer of risk or mitigation of risk. So you can apply, and even better, if you can apply this to your organization's risk appetite with the appropriate tolerance levels, you're now going to be armed to have a conversation with leadership that makes sense to the business. And I just want to land on the third thing, which is really about enhancing your intelligence capabilities. And if you're fighting today's threats, then you've already lost the battle. So making sure that you're informed by the threats that are on the horizon and that are also specific to your organization is absolutely critical. So the key point really is solve for tomorrow, and this will help you greatly enhance your ability to manage risk.
Thank you, Melody. Well, yeah, that's a nice thought, like solve for tomorrow. And we also learned that risk management is very fundamental to cybersecurity. Now, with that in mind, Mihoko, if I may turn to you, how institutionalized is that topic, for example, in your environment, in NTT Corporation, also in your area, in the critical infrastructure area?
Sure. Thank you so much. So let me talk about how institutionalized the cyber risk management is at NTT Group, which I'm working for. So the NTT Group has 280,000 employees in we operate in over 190 countries around the world. So we cover not only telecommunications, IT, cybersecurity services, but we also cover finance, urban development, advertisement, you name it. So it is really important to us to have a common global language to talk to each other, because we have such a broader cultural differentiations among us. So that's why we decided to choose the NIST cybersecurity framework for the cyber risk management. And the NTT Group has cybersecurity strategy and a minimum baseline based upon the NIST cybersecurity framework. And we also have a global CISO, Shinichi Yokohama, and he hosts CISO committees from different operation companies, CISOs, twice a year, and we discuss the trend of cyber threats, and we also update the cybersecurity efforts made by each operation companies every 6 months. And our global CISO also participate in the weekly executive meetings to update our C-suites, and he also regularly briefs to our auditors, so that C-suites and board members and auditors are all up to speed of the threat landscapes and also the cyber risk management. But to do that, as Melody mentioned during her excellent presentation, measurement is important. And to do measurement, we also have to have a good visualization to understand how to manage risks. So we use several measures to do, several ways to do that. And one way to do is the questionnaire based upon the NIST cybersecurity framework. And we also use a heat map to see the changes of the cyber risk to manage. And we also use dashboards to see the trend of, for example, phishing emails we see every week, so that our C-suites can see the changes or the trend of cyber threats and how to prioritize the cyber risk management. Thank you.
Thank you, Mihoko. That was very interesting to see how it's done in NTT Group. One thing you talked about, and also Melody talked about, was also giving transparency to leadership, to the executive level. And I think we have a panelist who can talk about this, because Martin, this is your job, right? You're an advisor to the CEO. So maybe I don't want to talk to you about how you advise the leadership, but also the other way around. What are also the duties or responsibilities of leadership, the CEO, the chair? What do they have to do if it comes to cyber risk management from your perspective?
Well, look, Kai, thanks very much indeed. I mean, I think in some ways it's the flip side of things that Miho and Melody have already mentioned. And not everyone has got the memo, by the way. I'll just pick up on something that Bruce said earlier on in the previous session, that not everyone's listening out there, including some leaders. And my goodness, at least in my opinion, it screams out at you if an enterprise has or hasn't got an engaged top leadership when it comes to cyber. I mean, look, there's a lot they got to do, but let me just make a few key points. Perhaps you can come back to them later. I mean, the first thing they do is that they inform themselves about cyber threats. And they use that knowledge to lead a discussion about cyber risk appetite, as I think it was Melody's already mentioned. I mean, that discussion's really got to happen. I mean, no defense against cyber is perfect. So the question the leader of all people has got to answer is how good is good enough? You know, if they're going to answer that, they've got to get educated about the threat at all levels. And I often talk about the strategic, the operational, and the tactical level. So the strategic level, the geopolitics behind it. The operational level, the systemic way in which the risk is changing. You know, why is there so much ransomware out there at the moment? And what do you need to think through to be ready for that? Well, what you need to think through is your ransom policy, so you don't have to do it in a hurry in a crisis. Look, a second headline I'll mention is about leadership itself, the leadership of the organization, their own personal leadership, which need to evolve to be fit for the digital age, a phrase I rather like. I really love cyber incident exercises led by the CEO, because, of course, he's always throw out valuable lessons, but also because they send a message. This matters to me, so it matters to you too. Look, there's a lot more here about putting the right non-executive oversight of cyber in place. So I'm glad somebody mentioned dashboards. Miho mentioned dashboards already, hugely important, deceptively so. And all of this, though, is not enough. It's a truism that cyber risk management has got to be holistic. People talk about process, technology, and people, but I'd add things like behavior, culture, and values. And only the very top leaders can persistently pull all of these threads together, and they must be pulled together. I would add that the cyber-ready CEO and chair, they seek additional assurance personally. For example, you mentioned my role by appointing their own experts to provide a second opinion about cyber defenses, or by sponsoring carefully targeted red team testing or similar. Look, just one final headline, and it's about what I call digital advantage. That the top of the shop is where the benefits of digitization can best be judged against the price to be paid for them, i.e. including cybersecurity. I mean, typically, it's perhaps surprising, we don't often make this comparison. And perhaps it's best to think of cyber as attacks, and attacks at a very reasonable low level on the overwhelming, massive benefits of digitization. The best 21st century leaders very much have that trade-off in mind. Now, look, I'm going to take a risk with my weak German here. Ladies and gentlemen, I think in Munich that we ought to say that cyber really is Chefsache.
Yeah, I love it. It was perfect, perfectly pronounced. And yes, Chefsache is something that we in Germany like very much. So that's good. As long as cybersecurity is not Neuland for the CEOs, right? So that's this notion of they don't know what this is all about. But I think you made that point that the best CEOs in this day and age, they are cyber savvy. They understand that they need to think about cyber and not just digital transformation, but also the text. So you have this picture of a text. So I like that very much. And I also heard from you, it needs to be holistic, right? This holistic, this broad view, including more than technology, organization, and so forth. Now, when I think of holistic, I'm also thinking in this day and age beyond the company boundaries, right? Towards the ecosystem, towards the supply chain. And in our previous panel with Bruce and Thomas, they've been speaking about the supply chain. And I know that, Roman, you have this kind of thinking anyway. So, Roman, I want to ask you, so how's the ecosystem notion and the supply chain relevant to risk management?
Very good question. Thank you for that. So, in my opinion, as Melody already pointed out, is risk management is the top discipline. And secondary to that, we have things like digital sovereignty, because yes, I want to have the things I bought making work the way I like, and not any other people can interfere with my will in the cyberspace. The second is cybersecurity. We are reducing the risk of running out of business by raising our security invests. So now, like 3 years ago, Ms. von der Leyen, now our head of European Union, was at that point our Minister for Defense. She said that in her opinion, all the vehicles that we have for defense in sea, in air, and on land are nothing else like $1 million IoT devices. And they have a very, very long supply chain. And there is an entire ecosystem working on putting those $1 billion devices together. So how can you make sure that if cyber is key for those $1 billion devices to work properly, that cyber is working properly in those $1 million IoT devices? And this question we raised in one of our very strong alliances, discussed for the last 3 years, and we came to the point, the first management doctrine is you cannot manage what you can't measure. Then we figured out, well, if you want to measure something, you have to know it. So it is impossible to reduce risks if you don't know what is inside the box. So now that leads to take a car or a train, and you want to understand exactly which hardware and software components in the IT are built in. That means you want to understand each controller on each of those devices built in. And you want to understand each of the patch mechanisms used to enhance the capabilities of those CPUs inside it. So what does it mean? The entire supply chain must deliver all the pieces that are in, and must explain how to patch. Now let's change to the B2C market. Assume you have a vacuum cleaning robot. What is there? It always has power. So now you have a student building in a camera, a microphone, and a wireless interface. Well, that's very easy. Now you deliver it because you say, well, the accu of the old thing may explode, use this one. And it will be used. So what you have is an Alexa that is steered by you. And now what we call that? Well, it's added values. In the speech of the backdoors, you are just adding values to a product. And if you add the product values, like in the car, you have a camera and you have the voice control, you may be able to have any cab in the world to be monitored. So the businessman sitting inside, we've heard about some of the nations putting like microphones into the business class seats of their air. Yeah, we have heard that. But what does that mean if you want to opposite against it? Well, you have to take control. And taking control means you know exactly what is built in. So that's the story. What is the challenge for the ecosystems and for the supply chain? We have to know exactly what is in and how to patch that. This is not an easy story, but we have to challenge it.
Thank you, Ramon. Yeah, I was just about to say, it seems like it's not an easy story. Can I stay with you, Ramon, for just another question, if that's okay? Because that really intrigued me to ask, okay, now we know the challenge. It seems to be terribly complex. I think this picture of billion-dollar IoT devices is a little bit frightening, I have to admit, though I'm in cybersecurity, so I see a lot of bad stories. But this one, that's even worse than the IoT fridge, right? That is normally discussed. So it is about visibility, it's about asset management, it's about being on top of patch management. I get that. It is terribly complex. What's the state of play today? So we know the challenge, but I want to ask you, Ramon, where are we today, right? Are we there yet?
We have many in the think tank thinking in the right way, and some even acting in the right way. So like Ischinger has told us, trust is the currency for diplomacy. The first thing what we have to do is we have to be very clear in our wording and in the granularity. So what do you expect to be trustworthiness when you buy a Bluetooth chip? There are no added values inside. So the Bluetooth chip doesn't have any backdoors and can talk to anybody which you don't know. This is a feature you expect from a trustworthy Bluetooth chip. So how do you get the trust in the delivery chain? How can you be sure? Well, you can say, well, if I have a liability of, let's say, $500 million for a piece that costs me $1, that's sufficient for me. And probably you will check whether the $500 million liability will be in effect. Because if that's the startup and there are two guys hanging around and just have like $10,000 on the bank account, it will not be helpful to have this liability. So what I'm trying to say is you have a fine granularity on the trust that you put in things. And yes, you can document that. And yes, if you have this entire supply chain, you can also build a trust chain. So you can have the attributes that you're interested in modulated in a trust chain. So what does that help? Assume you are very, very interested in availability. You will figure out that any invest in availability is opposite to invest in confidentiality. This is something that not everybody has from the first take. So take two firewalls, you have two ISPs, you get the firewall from the one vendor on the one side and from the other on the other side. What have you done? You have increased availability. Because if one of the firewalls gets down, the other works still. So now what I'm trying to tell is that not for each device, confidentiality is the most important thing. So now the chain of trust goes along with availability, for example, and you can kick out all the rest.
So you really have to deep dive a little bit into, and it's kind of device specific, and also the parts in the supply chain need to be managed, let's say individually and looked at individually, if I understand correctly, right?
That's all about management, yes.
Yes, thanks, Roman. That was very interesting to see, and also this notion of trust. All of a sudden, I need to say, coming into risk management. Now, I'm a firm believer that trust is very important, and of course, I'm with the ambassador there. That trust is very important. Trust is a currency. I say trust is gold, and this is also something that is in the ecosystem, and you need to think about the ecosystem. Now, thinking about this relationship of a company, let's say, to the surrounding companies, to the economy that they're active in, that also brings me to the notion of benchmarking and checking how a company performs in relation to other companies, or what is also out there in terms of threats and challenges. Mihoko, if I can turn to you again, how is the notion of benchmarking and external knowledge, threat intelligence important to risk management? How do you do that at NTT Group?
Sure. So I must mention the Charter of Trust, because Charter of Trust, as the name mentions and symbolizes, it's all about trust, right? Because it started out as a European companies focused consortiums to talk about cyber threats and educations and supply chain risk management, and as Ramon mentioned. But it's now more globalized, and NTT is the second member from the Indo-Pacific. And so as we globalize, we have better picture and visualize the cyber risks and also supply chain risk management. So that's great. But we also have to have a sector-specific landscape on cyber threats and supply chain risk management. So that's why each country or each region has an ISACs, or information sharing and analysis centers. And luckily enough, Japan has multiple ISACs, like telecommunications, ICT, finance, and so does the United States. And we also have a cross-sector forum in Japan consisting of different critical infrastructure sectors, so that we can talk about not only cyber threats, but we can also talk about education and cultivation of cyber professionals. Because as Ramon said, cyber risk management is all about technology, process, and people. So I think that these different layers of platforms to talk about different issues by sector, by country, and by region, or by the globe, and I think we are in a good shape to understand the cyber risk management.
Thank you, and thanks for, well, of course, referencing the Charter of Trust, which is close to my heart. So thanks for that. And also for giving us an overview on how this is done in Japan, which is, of course, very interesting to the audience. Now, there's two routes that I want to pursue in what you just said. One was, working with external bodies, authorities, and the other one is more about the people dimension, the human dimension, the education. I want to park that for a second. First, want to go to the authorities, and I think Martin, I want to give that question to you. How do you best kind of incorporate or work together on cyber issues with authorities, national authorities, law enforcement, and or also peers? Please give us an insight, maybe from your vast experience.
Well, look, I mean, I'll tell you how not to do it, and how not to do it is suddenly and in the middle of an instant. So I guess the key message is get in touch while there's nothing going on. Learn who out there can help you. And if you're running a global enterprise, you may be in lots of different jurisdictions. So figure out who's really smart and good on different subject areas. I mean, look, you might want to work out how to build relationships with people, frankly, invite people in, get them to give you talks within the limits of what is allowable to you. Of course, do your best to be helpful in return. So I would say all of that is of vital importance. And can I just add one other advert in this space? Don't do it alone. Do it in good company. Build alliances with your peers. Think about the people who you're normally in commercial competition with. Go phone them up. As a top leader, one of the my advice is give license to the CISOs to talk to each other intimately, and especially in the middle of incidents. So those would just be my sort of brief thoughts on that.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So this notion of collaboration and also setting this up before the crisis hits, right? So establish these relationships in, let's say, good times, so that they are also there and helpful in hopefully times that never come.
When you're doing your top level cyber incident exercise, you better think about, okay, so who would we have phoned at that point? Are they still in the job? When did we last see them? Have things moved on in this jurisdiction since the last time we wrote this down? You take the point.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you very much. Now, I already said I wanted to think a little bit about the education and the human factor. And as it happens, there's a question from the audience, which I would like to give to Melody, if I may, because I know, Melody, you have been active on ISACA and the like. So these institutions that are very helpful in educating on cybersecurity. The question goes like this. A major source of cyber risk is the human factor. How can the human factor better be integrated in risk strategies? Melody.
Sure, Kai. Yeah, thank you. It's an interesting question that comes up a lot, right? Because at the end of the day, your company or organization is only as strong as your people and users. It's the expertise of your cybersecurity team. It's not the wizards in the IT department, but it's the people that use the technology and that must follow and adhere the policies that you set out. And so there are different things you have to consider. I mean, one, I think most of us understand that the more you can automate, the better, right? Take the risk out of the hands of the user. It's always going to be a goal you want to strive for, right? And do that as much as you can, because when you can automate, when you can collect and monitor, you are able to get insights that will help you better protect the organization and understand what some of those risks are, right? But at the end of the day, there are certain risks that you're not going to be able to automate or to be able to control through technical means. And for that reason, it's extremely critical that you have an effective, not just a training and education program, but a communication strategy. Right. This is open dialogue with the end users, with your community, with stakeholders across the organization. And this message needs to come from different leaders across the company as well. You mentioned ISACA, for example, right? It's an organization that I've been very close to for many, many years. It's an industry organization that helps advise people that work within IT and cybersecurity, risk management, and audit. And it's really been a good place for communities to come together to help solve some of those problems, have some of those conversations that Martin was saying with your peers, right? When you go to conferences like this, one of the biggest values from that is it's one, of course, the content that the conferences deliver, but more so it's those meetings and conversations you have with the person sitting next to you, right? How are the other people that are around you solving probably the same problems that you're faced within your organization? Have those conversations and get ideas. right? And back to ISACA, they have a plethora of materials and resources that you can use and reuse and share. It's just a great community of people to get connected with if you want to understand some of these challenges better.
Thank you. Mihoko, I saw you wanted to also say something to this, so please go ahead.
Sure. So the some factor we haven't talked about today is I think the stress level, because the reason why we are using this platform, combining face-to-face meetings in a nice hotel in Munich with live music, and also the webinar and the online to talk to each other, is because of this, thanks to this pandemic, right? But we human beings and we have been able to utilize IT technologies to talk to each other and stay connected. But it also creates a huge amount of workload, especially for IT and cybersecurity workforce. And Microsoft published a really interesting report last month on the stress level among cybersecurity professionals. And Microsoft noticed that we see the more work to do and more online meetings to take care of. So they feel so fatigued and stressed. And we really, as Melody, emphasize the importance of the face-to-face meetings and contact and physical contact to each other. So I think it's worthwhile to mention during this Munich cybersecurity conference how to take down the level of stress among cybersecurity professionals, because they are the unsung heroes to protect ourselves from cyber threats. And this is especially important for cyber risk management and for this webinar on cyber risk management.
Thank you, Mihoko. Yeah, a very important point, right? With the cyber threats rising and of course the workload to cybersecurity professionals rising, and actually no end in sight, right? So the pandemic leading to more and more remote work and all our world going online, of course, it's more and more important to do cybersecurity right. So taking good care of our people, of our cybersecurity people, is important. Thank you for mentioning that, Mihoko, and really an important matter. One thing that could relieve the situation a little bit, or at least there are high hopes, and Melody mentioned it earlier, was automation. There is a question from the audience that is more specific also on AI and deep learning. And the question is on AI and deep learning in the sense of, can they contribute to a better risk management and relieve risk and security professionals? And I will just throw this question into the room, whoever wants to take it, but maybe Martin or Ramon, do you feel like answering that question? Let's go with Martin first, if I may.
Yeah, thanks very much, Kai. I tell you what this does remind me of is a question that used to get asked often when I was in government, which was, it's one of the sort of fun party questions for cyber professionals, if you like, is the offense or is the defense going to end up on top? And the answer, of course, is neither. It's going to go on forever. This is going to be an arms race. And for every new technology that comes along to help us, like machine learning, along comes some other new feature which is going to cause us difficulty, in this case, perhaps adversarial machine learning, or the ability of deep neural networks to develop new tools to trouble our defenses. So the answer to the specific question is that yes, of course, machine learning can help us in many ways, but then it's going to need to, because the threat is going to continue to accelerate. Now, my guess is that Ramon has got more to add to that, so I'll stop there.
Ramon, please go ahead.
Well, if I'm allowed to, there are two questions that I was shortly reading. One is about how can EU get digital sovereignty? And the other is how can governments and companies work together to secure stability and reliability? If you wouldn't mind, I would love to take that question.
Go ahead. Pick one of them if that's okay, and then we leave the other one to somebody else on the panel. So I know digital sovereignty is close to your heart. So Ramon, if you want to take that one, that would be great.
Yeah. So we have to see that the method how cybersecurity is purchased is not best of the breed, but cheapest cost. So what we do is we reduce quality to reduce the price. That doesn't help communities, ecosystems to be built up to be full scale. So we see that like every computer has antivirus on it. What we see is antivirus is a cheap and pressing market. So the vendors for antivirus will not cooperate. That's the result. If we press the price down, we don't have any expertise anymore. We have like 3-5 global players. So now when we look, Wintergerst has asked for cooperation. Sedgwick O has asked for tools to protect. And Helga Schmidt said, we need confidence and trust. And in my opinion, this does work together only if we accept that having a high knowledge needs to be fed by money. It doesn't help. Because those who have real high knowledge, they will be driven out of the market by those who sell fake security. And we have a lot of fake security. So we have to really challenge that problem on a political, on an alliance, on a consumer, and on a manufacturer side. And we can't get them together at the moment because €1 is spent only one time. It may be spent for a new SAP version. It may also be spent for any computer science investigation. But still, the fight for this €1 is dominant, is key against producing collective quality cooperation that gives us full-scale security from all of the vendors, all of the manufacturers. So I hope this statement is saying what I'm really trying to do for the last 30 years, bringing together communities with knowledge. And I see money is always opposite.
Thank you, Ramon, for this observation of collaboration, of bringing together knowledge. Now, maybe since we only have 3 minutes left, I want to do a very last round also of the other 3 panelists, taking this notion of collaboration, because we all said it's important. Now, I want to ask you, how can we increase that level of collaboration? And please give me just 1 or 2 sentences. And I want to start with Mihoko. 1-2 sentences. How do we increase collaboration on cybersecurity?
To accelerate collaboration, I think we need to trusted leaders so that everybody wants to, okay, because he or she says this, we have to do this, because then he or she knows now what to prioritize. Then we can accelerate the collaboration, I think.
Excellent, thank you. Melody, right over to you. 1-2 sentences. How do we better collaborate?
Yes, and I think Martin touched on it earlier, but it's breaking down the barriers to collaboration, much like the organizations like the Charter of Trust. It's enabling legally the ability to have conversations with your competitors, right, that your business competitors, and talk about these discussions as a cybersecurity cohort. So breaking down the barriers to collaboration.
Excellent. So we heard kind of top-down leadership, breaking down the barriers. Martin, anything to add to this on collaboration? Anything else you can give to the audience?
I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll quickly quote 2 US presidents.
Wow.
First of all, Barack Obama, which is don't let a good crisis go to waste. So every time we have a major incident, I wish I had $1 for every time I bet SolarWinds has been mentioned today, but don't let a good crisis go to waste. Use these incidents before something truly terrible happens. And then finally, Bill Clinton, you know, and I love the question earlier on about people, you know, hey, look, you know, in the sense of cooperation, in the sense of the malicious insider or just the incompetent insider, you know, I heard a great phrase once, which was, you know, cyber, well, it's the people, stupid.
Thank you very much. And how nice to end with quoting two US presidents. So thanks a lot for this panel. I want to do a really quick summary or wrap up of what we talked about before we then, of course, give back to the moderator and continue with the conference. So really short, we learned that risk management is really fundamental to cybersecurity because it is about really prioritizing and measuring the risks and then prioritizing the strategies and the measures that you take to deal with that risk. Now, that exercise is, of course, done by the cybersecurity team and the CISO and the like, needs to involve the top level leadership, and they also have a duty to take care of it. So it's Chefsache, as we heard from Martin. Now, what they have to do is to really have that holistic view, incorporating the supply chain, looking also to the outside world, and also doing this benchmarking outside. And one thing that they need to do is take good care of their people, educate people, and really take in the human factor. And by doing so, well, they can have a good risk management and setup, but there's also a lot to be done. So collaborate more. That's at least one statement that we want to give back to the conference. It's all about collaboration. Thank you very much to the panelists, and also thank you to the audience for listening in. Thank you.
Thank you very much to our moderator and to the panel. Thank you, Kai Hermansen, and special thanks to our experts, Martin Clemens, Mihoko Matsubara, Melody Berset, and last but not least, Ramon Mörl.